Okay, so let's keep going with the form design here. The first thing I'll point out is if this bothers you, the fact that the button is not the same color as the form itself, let me show you what you should do. If I change the color, the back color property of the button to green-yellow, just like the form, it still has not changed. But what you can do is, still with the button selected, see, you need to make sure, especially in the beginning, that you're setting the properties for the correct control. Like the button is selected, it has the white dots around it. It's possible that the form will be selected, and then you're doing the properties for that control. So you need to keep those straight and make sure you're changing the correct property for the correct control. And you can also see in the properties window the actual property that you're dealing with. It'll display it there. And you can use this to find the property as well, or click on the interface. But so I have my button selected. I did change the back color property, no effect, but for the button, if I scroll down and set this use visual style back color, change that to false. And now my button is the same color as the form. This is not the kind of thing I would care about, like when I'm grading your work, but some students are really particular about the way things look, which is fine. So, and by all means, play around with the properties. You can explore, you can take artistic license on the colors, the pictures. You can always get creative in this class. Okay, so a couple more properties I want to talk about on the button. The name property. This is what we call an essential control, meaning this button is going to be involved in the code that we end up typing in this application. And so whenever you have an essential control, you really want to give that control a really good, meaningful name, so that when I'm coding, I'm like, oh, this is the button that you click for, to change the picture or whatever. So, I think this button we were going to say click, we were going to call it, I think in the demo it said click for more or something like that. So I think I'm going to name my button BTN. That's a prefix I like to use for buttons. BTN, get in the habit of using that. BTN more. Okay, that's good. This is going to be the click for more button. Okay, so I have a nice meaningful name for my button. Button 1 is not a good name. Okay, I mean, if I had multiple buttons in this application, button 1, button 2, button 3, those are terrible names for controls. You want good descriptive names for pretty much everything, especially your essential controls. So that's something that I'm just going to keep dwelling on over and over again in my lectures, but the good descriptive names for things. Okay, also the text property, we said we were going to say click for more. Most controls do have a text property. Which is, what the user sees on that control. Okay, so our button is set up. I think we also had a picture box with the Moraine Valley picture. One thing here's a tip, this is a lot of controls in the toolbox. Most of those, the vast majority, we're never going to use. If you want, you can go into, we can collapse this. Instead of looking at all of the controls, we can do just the common controls. So this is a shorter list. A lot of these we are going to use throughout the semester. So you see the button is there. I'm going to throw a label in here. Okay. Now notice I made a nice wide rectangle for my label, and then it snapped back to this tiny little label 1. That's the auto size property of the label. Notice the label is selected. Okay, label 1, I don't like that name. We're going to change that in a minute. But the auto size property, I'm going to set that to false. And I can just double click where it says true. I double click and it switches it to false. This is the original size that I wanted for my label. Okay, so you have to change the auto size to false if you want control over the size of that label. Otherwise, it's going to fit it to the contents of the label. Now, I told you I don't like this name, label 1. This is going to be an essential control because we're changing the label text at runtime when the user clicks the button. So I'm going to call this LBL message. How about LBL message? Okay. And then I think the text starts out as welcome to, we'll say CIS 154. Okay. We'll just start out with that simple message. And, you can experiment with the font. The label has a font property as well. Let's see where that is. Okay, so you have all the typical font things. I think if we even click on this ellipsis, we'll just get the traditional Windows font dialog box as well. So you can maybe do a different kind of font and maybe make it bigger. Okay, and that's another thing. If your label isn't big enough, then it's going to be cut off. So you have to be mindful of that as well. Okay, and all right, so let's do a picture box. Okay, and this I'm going to grab from the toolbox. You can draw a control with your mouse, or you can just plop it onto the form and then size it. You'll get a feel for how this all works. The pictures that I have, now remember they're in the bin debug folder. I'm going to the picture box is the kind of control where it's very typical to want to put an image in there. So it has a smart tag to go for that image. Or you can go through the properties. The image property will get you to the same place. Okay, so here I'm going to import, and I'm on the desktop here where, oh, there's my welcome app. Drilling down into the bin folder, into the debug folder. I'm going to start with this one. This is kind of like the first picture. Okay, now look at this. This is my pet peeve, okay? Don't do this. The image is there, it's loaded, it's fine, but all I'm seeing is a little corner of the sky, okay? The reason is the image is not fitted to the picture box. So I am going to change the very important size mode property, and you can get it through here too, through the properties window, and change it to stretch image, okay? Now we can see the whole thing. All right, so there you have it. I have set the properties for all of my essential controls, okay? And I think I will end this video, and then in the next video we'll start writing a little bit of code.